On Christmas Eve 2002, Scott Peterson told police his pregnant wife had simply gone missing, but the moment investigators walked into that house, something felt deeply wrong. Because Laci Peterson wasn't just missing, she was 8 months pregnant. It was Christmas morning, and her husband had already moved on before her body was even cold. Laci Denise Peterson was everything a small California town could be proud of. She was warm, radiant, and the kind of woman who made every room feel like home. Born on May 4, 1975, in Modesto, California, she had grown up surrounded by a family that loved her fiercely, her mother Sharon Rocha, her stepfather Ron Gransky, and a tight circle of people who described her as the light of their lives. She studied horticulture at California Polytechnic State University in San Luis Obispo, and it was there, in the late 1990s, that she met Scott Peterson, a tall, handsome, charming young man from a well-off family who swept her off her feet in the way that only certain kinds of men know how to do. They married in August 1997. They bought a house on Covina Avenue in Modesto. They adopted a golden retriever named Mackenzie. And by the fall of 2002, Laci was glowing. She was 8 months pregnant. The baby was a boy. They had already chosen his name, Connor. By all appearances, they had the perfect life. But appearances, as this story will make devastatingly clear, can be the most dangerous thing in the world. What nobody in Laci's life knew, not her mother, not her friends, not the neighbors who waved at her from across the street, was that Scott Peterson had been living a second life for weeks. On November 20th, 2002, just over a month before Christmas, Scott had walked into a massage therapy clinic in Fresno, California, and met a woman named Amber Fry. He told her he was single. He told her he was unattached. He told her he was free. He took her to a candlelit dinner. He spoke softly, listened carefully, and made her feel like she was the only woman in the world. Amber Fry had no idea that the man sitting across from her had a pregnant wife at home, counting down the days until she became a mother for the first time. By the time December arrived, Scott Peterson was deeply involved with Amber Fry, calling her constantly, sending messages, building something that looked from the outside like a love story. And Laci, at home on Covina Avenue, was rubbing her belly and reading baby books and making plans for the new year, completely unaware that the man she trusted with her life had already built an exit. Christmas Eve 2002 began like any other morning on Covina Avenue. Scott Peterson later told police that he had seen Laci around 9:30 in the morning before he left the house. He said she was watching a morning television program and mopping the kitchen floor. He said he kissed her goodbye, loaded his truck, and drove 90 miles north to the Berkeley Marina, where he kept a 14-foot aluminum boat he had purchased just weeks earlier, a boat he had never mentioned to Laci. He said he went fishing alone in San Francisco Bay in the cold December water on Christmas Eve. He said he returned home that afternoon, put his clothes in the washing machine, and called his mother-in-law to ask if Laci was there. When Sharon Rocha said no, Scott called the police. By the time officers arrived at the house, Laci Peterson was gone. Her dog Mackenzie had been found wandering the neighborhood, his leash still attached to his collar. Nothing inside the house was disturbed. Her purse was still there. Her keys were still there. Her car was still in the driveway. The only thing missing was Laci. From the very first hours of the investigation, something about Scott Peterson's behavior unsettled the detectives who worked the case. He was calm in a way that registered as wrong. He didn't ask the questions a frightened husband asks. He didn't pace. He didn't break down. He cooperated with investigators in the way that someone who has rehearsed cooperation cooperates, smoothly, efficiently, without the jagged edges of real panic. When asked to take a polygraph test, he declined. When officers wanted to search his warehouse, a rented storage space he had never mentioned to Laci's family, he consented, but investigators noted that something about the space felt recently cleaned. And then, on December 30th, just 6 days after Laci was reported missing, a Fresno massage therapist named Amber Fry walked into a police station and told detectives that she had been dating Scott Peterson. She said he had told her he was not married. She said she had seen his face on the news and put the pieces together herself. She was in tears. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. Investigators asked her to keep taking his calls and to record every conversation. She agreed. Over the following weeks, as Modesto held vigils and printed flyers and prayed for Laci Peterson to come home, Scott Peterson was on the phone with his girlfriend, using pet names, making plans, talking about the future, a future, it was becoming clear, that had never included his wife or his unborn son. The recordings Amber Frey made of those phone calls became some of the most chilling evidence in American criminal history. In one call, made on December 31st, 2002, while search parties were still combing the streets of Modesto for his pregnant wife, Scott Peterson told Amber Frey that he was in Paris. He was not in Paris. He was at a candlelight vigil for Laci, standing in front of cameras, wearing a yellow ribbon, asking the public for help finding the woman he had already stopped looking for. He described fake celebrations, fake crowds, fake fireworks, constructing an entire fictional evening abroad while his wife's family stood a few feet away, weeping. The call was recorded. Every word was preserved. And when investigators listened back, they understood exactly what kind of man they were dealing with. The months that followed were a slow agony for Laci's family. Sharon Rocha appeared on television, her voice barely holding together, begging for her daughter to be found. Search volunteers knocked on doors across Modesto. Tips poured in from across the country. On January 24, 2003, Amber Frey held her own press conference, flanked by her attorney Gloria Allred, and publicly revealed that she had been deceived by Scott Peterson, that she had unknowingly been his mistress, that she had cooperated fully with police, and that she was devastated by what she had learned. The press conference shifted public opinion dramatically. The portrait of Scott Peterson as a grieving husband began to crack. And as investigators dug deeper, the cracks widened. They discovered he had taken out a $250,000 life insurance policy on Laci. They discovered he had been researching bay currents and tidal patterns in the weeks before Christmas. They discovered he had sold Laci's sport utility vehicle in the weeks after her disappearance, before her body had been found, before she had even been declared dead. On April 13, 2003, a man walking along the shoreline near the Richmond Marina in the San Francisco Bay Area spotted something in the water. It was the remains of a male fetus, partially decomposed, and it washed ashore not far from where Scott Peterson had claimed to be fishing on Christmas Eve. The following day, a woman's body was discovered approximately 1 mile away. Both sets of remains were severely degraded weeks in the cold. Salt water had done terrible damage, but forensic investigators worked carefully and patiently. On April 18th, the California Attorney General confirmed what Laci's family had been dreading for 4 months. The remains were those of Laci Peterson and her unborn son Connor. They had been found within miles of the exact spot where Scott Peterson had launched his boat on Christmas Eve. Within hours of the identification, Scott Peterson was arrested in La Jolla, California, near San Diego, hundreds of miles from Modesto. When officers approached him, they discovered he had dyed his hair blonde and grown a goatee, dramatically altering his appearance. His car contained approximately $15,000 in cash, his brother's identification card, multiple cell phones, camping gear, and several pairs of his parents' credit cards. He had also brought along survival supplies. Investigators believed he was preparing to cross the border into Mexico and disappear. He was taken into custody without incident and transported back to Modesto, where he was charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder, one for the killing of Laci, one for the killing of Connor. Scott Peterson's trial began on June 1, 2004, in Redwood City, San Mateo County, after a judge ruled he could not receive a fair trial in his hometown due to the overwhelming pretrial publicity. For 19 weeks, the prosecution and the defense laid out their cases to a jury of 6 men and 6 women. The prosecution had no eyewitness to the crime. They had no murder weapon. They had no crime scene. What they had was something more textured and more damning, a mosaic of behavior, decisions, lies, and timing that, taken together, painted an unmistakable picture. They had the insurance policy. They had the recorded phone calls. They had the boat purchased in secret. They had the title charts. They had a husband who had described himself as a widower to his girlfriend before his wife's body was ever found. They had a man who stood at a candlelight vigil for his missing pregnant wife and called his mistress from the parking lot to describe an imaginary New Year's Eve in Paris. They had a man who, according to multiple witnesses, was seen laughing at one of Laci's memorial events. On August 10, 2004, Amber Frey took the stand. The courtroom was silent as jurors listened to the recordings she had made. Scott Peterson's voice, relaxed and intimate, weaving lie after lie while an entire nation searched for the woman he had left in the bay. On November 12, 2004, after 7 days of deliberations that saw 2 jurors removed and replaced, the jury delivered its verdict. Scott Peterson was found guilty of first-degree murder with special circumstances in the death of Laci Peterson and second-degree murder in the death of Connor Peterson. The crowd outside the courthouse erupted. Laci's mother, Sharon Rocha, collapsed into the arms of people around her, finally releasing 4 months of waiting and 2 years of grief. Scott Peterson sat at the defense table, expressionless, as the verdicts were read aloud. In December 2004, the jury unanimously recommended the death penalty. On March 16, 2005, Judge Alfred DeLucci sentenced Scott Peterson to death by lethal injection and ordered him to pay $10,000 toward the cost of Laci's funeral. He was transferred to San Quentin State Prison, where he was placed on death row. In 2020, the California Supreme Court upheld his conviction, but overturned his death sentence, citing errors during jury selection that had resulted in an unfair penalty phase. In December 2021, Scott Peterson was resentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. He remains incarcerated today. In January 2024, the Los Angeles Innocence Project announced it was representing Peterson, claiming there may be evidence that was withheld or not properly investigated at trial. As of 2025, legal proceedings continue. Scott Peterson has never admitted guilt. He has never expressed remorse. He has never explained what happened to Laci and Connor Peterson on Christmas Eve 2002. Laci Peterson was 27 years old when she was killed. She never got to hold her son. She never got to see Connor take his first breath, say his first word, or take his first step. She was 8 months pregnant, surrounded by baby shower gifts and paint swatches for the nursery, planning a future that a man she trusted had already decided to destroy. Her mother, Sharon Rocha, has spent over 2 decades carrying that grief publicly, advocating for victims of domestic violence and demanding that Laci's story be remembered not as a tabloid headline, but as a human life, a daughter, a wife, a mother who deserved so much more than what she got. Laci and Connor are buried together. They never got to meet. If this story stayed with you, you are not alone. The case of Laci Peterson changed how America talks about domestic violence, about the faces that danger can wear, and about what it looks like when the most dangerous person in a woman's life is the one she shares a bed with. We cover cases like this every single week, real stories, real women, real consequences. If you believe these stories deserve to be heard, hit subscribe right now and make sure you never miss another one. Every view, every share, every comment tells us that this work matters. Because to the families left behind, it always does.